It was a bright and sweltering May morning in 2025 when Donald Trump, sitting comfortably in the opulent Mar-a-Lago estate, made a fateful decision that would haunt his political career forever. Confident in his years of experience and self-declared prowess in handling international negotiations, he dialed Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso, with one thought in mind: to humiliate the young African leader on the global stage. "Ibrahim, my young friend, how about we do a televised debate?" Trump said, his voice oozing arrogance. "Let the world see how a seasoned president handles complex international issues." Ibrahim, 35 years old, paused for a moment. He had learned to be cautious with American politicians, especially Trump. His experiences taught him to always stay a few steps ahead. "Mr. President, what topics would you like to discuss?" Ibrahim asked, his tone betraying no emotion. "Africa, trade development, the things your people could learn from us, and how America truly works." Trump replied dismissively, "It'll be educational for your people." Ibrahim could hear the condescension in Trump's voice. It wasn't lost on him. He smiled subtly on the other end of the line. "Interesting proposal, Mr. Trump. I accept, but I suggest an open format. No scripts, no narrow topics. Let's allow the conversation to flow naturally." Trump laughed heartily. "Perfect. The more spontaneous, the better. You'll see how a real president conducts business." As he hung up the phone, Trump turned to his aides and boasted, "I'm going to humiliate this African kid on world television. This will be a lesson in real leadership." But in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim wasn't taking the challenge lightly. Far from it. He was already plotting his next move. The very fact that Trump had thrown down the gauntlet was a golden opportunity. Ibrahim convened a private meeting with Dr. Alon Girego, his most trusted advisor. "Trump has given us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," Ibrahim said, his voice cold with purpose. "He underestimates us, but we've been investigating the Trump Organization's connections to corrupt African regimes for years. Now we have the perfect chance to expose him." Dr. Girego was intrigued but still confused. "What kind of preparation do you mean, President?" Ibrahim's eyes gleamed with the cold determination of a man who had waited years for this moment. "We have all the evidence we need. The Trump Organization's covert operations in Africa, the money laundering, the illegal mining. Trump thinks we're ignorant, but we've been watching every move." He leaned back in his chair, the weight of the coming confrontation heavy in the air. "If he wants a no-holds-barred debate, we'll give him just that. Let's show him what real leadership looks like." And so, Ibrahim set to work. His team of experts assembled in a secure room within the presidential palace, presenting him with damning evidence. The dossier they handed him was far more than just a few documents. It was a complete roadmap of Trump's illegal operations across Africa. "Mr. President," Major Amaru Sawadogo began, his voice steady but grave, "we have documents proving that the Trump Organization laundered $340 million for African dictators between 2018 and 2022. These funds flowed through suspicious transactions with clear ties to illegal mining operations in Congo, Chad, and Mali." Ibrahim scanned the documents, his jaw tightening as the details unfolded before him. The Trump Organization was not just involved in money laundering. It was implicated in financing militias, corrupt officials, and destabilizing governments for profit. His pulse quickened. He was holding the truth of a criminal empire in his hands. Dr. Girego continued, "There's more. We've traced a direct connection to the 2021 operation that destabilized the Mayan government, all to benefit Trump's mining concessions. Over 2,300 civilians died in the aftermath." Ibrahim closed his eyes for a moment, the gravity of the situation sinking in. His mind raced, but he maintained his composure. "How many deaths did this operation cause?" he asked, his voice a controlled fury. "An estimated 2,300 civilians," Dr. Girego confirmed. Ibrahim felt a cold anger sweep over him. He knew this was more than just politics. This was personal. "We have irrefutable proof," he said, looking up at his team. "Audio recordings, bank transfers, emails, documents all signed by Trump. 3 independent intelligence agencies have verified everything." In Washington, Trump was preparing in a completely different way. His aides were worried. Trump had always prided himself on his ability to charm and intimidate. But Ibrahim Traoré was no typical African leader. The president had heard the rumors of Ibrahim's intelligence and meticulous planning. Still, he dismissed them. "This is going to be a piece of cake," Trump told his staff with his signature bravado. "Young African leader against an experienced American president? Please, I'll show him how real business works." But little did Trump know, Ibrahim had already seen through the facade. He knew the depths of Trump's dealings in Africa, and he was ready to expose it all. By the time the debate arrived on May 25, 2025, the world was watching, anticipating a clash of titans. CNN had organized the event, ensuring a global broadcast to 89 countries. Anderson Cooper would moderate, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The world's two most talked about leaders would face off live, under the unblinking eye of the world. Trump adjusted his signature red tie in front of the camera, exuding the same confidence he always did, as though he were already in control of the situation. Ibrahim, however, sat calmly in his presidential office, documents carefully arranged beside him. The contrast couldn't have been starker. "Good evening, world," Anderson Cooper began, his voice calm but carrying the weight of the occasion. "Tonight, we have a historic debate between President Donald Trump and President Ibrahim Traoré, focusing on global leadership and African development." The screen split, showing Trump on one side, dressed in his trademark suit and tie, sitting confidently in CNN's plush studio, and Ibrahim on the other, surrounded by the simple but dignified setting of his presidential office. Anderson Cooper turned to Trump. "President Trump, you called for this debate. What is your vision for African development?" Trump leaned forward, eager to launch into his usual speech. "Africa needs to understand that real development comes from partnership with countries that know how to do business. America has built the greatest economy in the world, and Africans should learn from us." Ibrahim, unfazed, responded with a smile. "Mr. Trump, I agree that Africa needs to learn from international experiences. But let me suggest something. Perhaps there are some lessons to be learned about what not to do when it comes to ethical business practices." Trump let out a laugh, dismissive as ever. "Ibrahim, you're young. You don't understand how the real world works. Business is about winning." "Interesting perspective," Ibrahim replied, his voice steady, "especially coming from someone who considers winning to include illegal operations in Africa." The temperature in the room shifted immediately. Trump stopped laughing. His face froze as Ibrahim's words hit like a ton of bricks. "Mr. Trump," Ibrahim continued, opening a folder beside him, "would you like to explain the African Diamond operation from 2021? Trump's face went pale. The moment Ibrahim mentioned the African Diamond operation, Trump's face drained of color. The operation was a secret he thought was buried deep, locked away behind closed doors, hidden from the prying eyes of the world. For a brief moment, he faltered, something the world had rarely seen. His signature confidence was nowhere to be found. "I don't know what you're talking about," Trump stammered, his voice cracking slightly. For the first time in his public career, he seemed genuinely rattled. The audience, both in the studio and across the globe, could sense the shift in the air. Trump, for all his bravado, was not in control anymore. Ibrahim's calm smile never wavered as he held up a document to the camera. "This is a memorandum, Mr. Trump, signed by you on March 15, 2021, authorizing a payment of $23 million to militias in Mali to secure mining operations for your company," Ibrahim said, his voice steady, piercing through the tension. It was part of a larger plan to seize control of diamond mining, and it led to the deaths of 2,300 civilians. Trump shook his head, his desperation mounting. "That's a fake document," he shouted, his voice rising. Ibrahim didn't flinch. "Verified by 3 independent intelligence agencies, including the FBI," he replied coolly. "I would be careful about calling it fake. It's not just the document. We have audio recordings, emails, bank transfers, all tied directly to your organization and signed by you personally." He gestured to the screen, where the damning evidence was displayed. Anderson Cooper, though professionally composed, looked genuinely shocked. "President Traoré, Are you accusing President Trump of funding militias? He asked, his voice barely containing his surprise. I am presenting documented evidence, Ibrahim corrected calmly, his eyes locked onto the camera. This is not a smear campaign. These are facts. Operation African Diamond resulted in 2,300 deaths in Mali, all to benefit the Trump Organization's illegal mining concessions. I can't just stand by and ignore this any longer. Trump's eyes were wide with disbelief, but his usual bluster was gone. He stammered for a response, but it was clear he was struggling to maintain his composure. The intensity in the studio grew unbearable as the world watched a once powerful man unravel in real time. I don't have to listen to this, Trump muttered, his voice breaking. He tried to rise from his seat, but Cooper quickly intervened. Mr. Trump, you agreed to an open format for this debate, Anderson said, his tone firm but respectful. President Traoré has presented serious allegations, and the world deserves an answer. Trump, still flustered, sank back into his chair, his face contorted in rage and confusion. Ibrahim wasn't done, not by a long shot. He flipped the pages of his folder with a deliberate slowness, each moment ratcheting up the tension. Let's talk about Operation Congo Red, shall we? Ibrahim said, his voice calm and lethal. A second operation where the Trump Organization laundered $67 million through shell companies, funding the illegal extraction of coltan, a mineral used in smartphones and laptops. Trump's hands trembled. No, he whispered under his breath, panic creeping into his voice. But Ibrahim was relentless. This operation displaced 45,000 Congolese families, destroyed 12 villages, and contaminated rivers with mercury, all so that your company could control 40% of the region's illegal coltan production. He slid another document into view, showing the horrifying images of displaced families, villages reduced to ash, and the environmental damage that had been wrought. Trump recoiled as the photos flashed on the screen. His face went pale, sweat dripping from his brow. He wiped his forehead, his mind racing to formulate a defense, but he was caught in a web he couldn't escape. Ibrahim continued without missing a beat. You want to deny this, Mr. Trump? Well, here's your signature on every contract. Here are the tapes of you approving these transactions. These aren't just rumors. These are your crimes, documented by your own hand. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank statements, wire transfers, contracts, all of it pointed back to Trump's direct involvement. Cooper turned to Trump. President Trump, how do you explain these transactions? These aren't small operations. They are crimes that have devastated entire communities. Trump's face contorted in frustration. This is all part of an international conspiracy, he shouted, his voice cracking. You're trying to destroy me. Ibrahim's response was sharp and calm. Mr. Trump, there's no conspiracy. You documented your own crimes. You recorded your own conversations. Your money, your signature, your orders. You left a trail of blood, and now you must face the consequences. Ibrahim leaned forward, his eyes never leaving Trump's increasingly panic-stricken face. This is just the beginning, Mr. Trump. I have much more to show the world. Do you want me to continue? Trump remained silent, his breath shallow. He had been caught, and the weight of it was beginning to sink in. His worst nightmare was coming true. His empire of lies and exploitation was collapsing, and he couldn't stop it. But Ibrahim wasn't going to let up. He had already pulled back the curtain on one of Trump's darkest secrets, and now he would take it a step further. You want to deny African Diamond and Congo Red? Ibrahim said, his voice cool, almost casual. How about we talk about a much more recent operation? Operation Chad. Trump froze. His eyes widened in horror. No, he whispered, shaking his head. You're not going to. Ibrahim's voice cut through the air. It was 2022. Your organization funded the murder of a prominent community leader in Chad, someone who opposed your mining operations. I have a 47-minute recording of you ordering the hit. Trump's entire body stiffened. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Sweat poured down his face as his world came crashing down around him. Ibrahim smiled coldly. You really thought you could get away with it, didn't you? You thought Africa was your playground. that you could exploit its people and resources without facing any consequences. But I'm here to show you that justice has no borders." "That's a lie," Trump shouted, but his voice cracked under the weight of his own terror. "You're lying." Ibrahim didn't flinch. "The recording has been verified. Voice analysis experts confirmed it's you. Do you want to play it back live?" Trump didn't respond. His silence was enough to speak volumes. Ibrahim Traoré had him cornered. The American president, who had prided himself on his unshakable confidence, was now exposed for what he truly was: a criminal, a liar, and a war profiteer. The world watched in stunned silence. It was a moment of history, one that would change the course of geopolitics forever. Ibrahim wasn't done. He had more to reveal, but for the first time, Trump didn't try to fight back. The man who had once dominated world politics was now reduced to a shell of himself, paralyzed by the truth. The atmosphere in the studio was thick with tension. Donald Trump, once the embodiment of unwavering confidence, was visibly cracking. His face was a mask of panic, his fingers trembling as he fidgeted with his tie, an outward sign of the storm raging inside him. The cameras captured every detail: his inability to respond, his body language betraying the desperate scramble for any semblance of control. Ibrahim Traoré, on the other hand, was calm, his composure unshaken by Trump's unraveling. His sharp eyes never wavered from the screen. He knew he had the upper hand now, and he wasn't about to let go of it. "Let's continue, Mr. Trump," Ibrahim said coldly, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "You wanted to debate, but now the world is learning the truth about you." Trump's eyes darted around, looking for an escape route. His mouth moved, but no words came out. He was stuck. No amount of bravado could mask the undeniable reality that was now unfolding before him. Ibrahim's next words hit like a sledgehammer, and the world was listening. "Operation Chad," he said, his voice laced with precision. "In 2022, your organization funded the murder of a community leader in Chad who opposed your mining operations." Trump flinched visibly, his eyes wide with horror. For a brief moment, his arrogance faltered, replaced by fear. He had known this moment would come. He had always known that the truth would eventually come for him, but he never imagined it would be in such a public and devastating manner. I didn't do that," Trump mumbled, his voice trembling for the first time. "That's not true. You're lying." Ibrahim didn't flinch. "It's all in the recordings, Mr. Trump. I have a 47-minute tape of you personally ordering the hit on that leader, a man who had been a vocal opponent of your operations in Chad. You thought you could get away with it, but the truth is on record." Trump's face was a portrait of sheer panic now. His lips moved, but the words didn't come. He wanted to fight back, to shout that it was all a lie, but nothing seemed to come out. The walls were closing in, and he was powerless to stop it. "And don't think you can play the African conspiracy card this time," Ibrahim continued, his tone now edged with cold fury. "We have verified the recording with voice analysis experts. It's your voice, Mr. Trump. There's no escaping it now." Trump's breath quickened as the world watched the walls of his empire crumble. The once powerful figure, known for his bravado and cutthroat business practices, was now exposed for the war criminal he truly was. The chilling truth had been laid bare for the world to see. A man who had built his wealth on the backs of death and destruction, all while claiming to be a champion of justice and freedom. Anderson Cooper, still maintaining his professionalism, turned to Trump, trying to give him an opportunity to respond, though the air had already shifted irreversibly. "Mr. Trump, these are serious allegations. Do you have a response to the recordings President Traoré has presented?" Trump remained silent. His body language was a complete surrender, his head low, unable to meet the camera's gaze. The truth was undeniable, and the pressure of the situation was too much. It wasn't just his reputation on the line anymore. It was his very freedom. Ibrahim's next words were calculated, surgical. He had the former president exactly where he wanted him. "If you want to deny the murder of the community leader in Chad, Mr. Trump, I can show the world the documents that corroborate it. I have the contracts, the payment records, and the bank statements. Your organization sent millions to a militia in Chad, all to secure control over the country's mineral resources. Trump's eyes widened in disbelief as Ibrahim slowly revealed the paper trail of corruption and bloodshed that Trump had carefully concealed for years. The audience was rapt, every word from Ibrahim cutting deeper into the facade of power that Trump had spent a lifetime cultivating. "You've been playing a dangerous game for years, Mr. Trump," Ibrahim continued, his voice unwavering. "You thought you could exploit Africa, destroy its people, and take its resources without facing the consequences. But now the world knows who you truly are." For a brief moment, Trump looked like he might try to turn the situation around, but there was no way out. The truth had caught up with him. He had underestimated Ibrahim Traoré. He had underestimated the power of an honest, young African leader with nothing to lose. Ibrahim wasn't just exposing Trump's crimes in Africa. He was exposing his entire worldview. "You call yourself a businessman, Mr. Trump, but there's nothing businesslike about murder, exploitation, and corruption," Ibrahim continued. "You're a criminal, and the world is watching as you are held accountable for your actions." Trump stood up abruptly, his face red with a mix of anger and fear. He opened his mouth, perhaps to scream, perhaps to try and regain some semblance of control, but his words were lost in the sea of shock and disbelief that had consumed him. He tried to move toward the exit, but he was trapped, physically and metaphorically. The world's most powerful man, cornered by the truth. There was no escaping it now. But Ibrahim wasn't done. He leaned forward in his chair, and his voice rang out like a clarion call, piercing through the tension in the room. "You thought you could buy your way out of anything. But let's talk about something else, Mr. Trump. Let's talk about how you've used your power to buy off American politicians, to ensure that no one ever investigated your operations in Africa. You have allies in the U.S. government who have kept your secrets hidden." Trump froze, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. The truth was out now, and there was no place to hide. Ibrahim wasn't just exposing his crimes abroad. He was about to reveal how Trump had corrupted the American political system to protect himself. "I have a list, Mr. Trump," Ibrahim said, his voice almost icy. "I have a list of American politicians, judges, and FBI officials who have taken bribes from your organization to ensure that your crimes in Africa went unnoticed." Ibrahim pulled out another folder, this one filled with documents that made Trump's blood run cold. The names were there, senators, judges, even FBI officials, all paid off to keep the truth buried. The connection between Trump and the American political system, once carefully hidden, was now exposed. Trump's face paled as he saw the names of the corrupt officials Ibrahim had uncovered. The documents revealed transactions, wire transfers, and evidence of bribes that tied Trump's organization to the highest levels of the U.S. government. The world had just learned that Trump wasn't just a businessman gone rogue. He was part of a much larger system of corruption, a web of deceit that reached from Africa to Washington, D.C. "You've corrupted not only Africa, Mr. Trump," Ibrahim said, his voice like steel, "but you've corrupted the very institutions that are supposed to protect the people. And now, the truth is coming for you." Trump's eyes were wild now. His body trembled as he realized the magnitude of his exposure. This wasn't just the end of his political career. This was the end of his empire. The studio had fallen silent, the air thick with the weight of the moment. Every word that left Ibrahim Traoré's mouth now carried the force of an undeniable truth. The world was witnessing a man, a once powerful leader, being unmasked for his crimes. And the man in the hot seat, Donald Trump, was no longer the commanding, self-assured figure he once was. He was a broken man, exposed, powerless to stop the avalanche of revelations that Ibrahim had unleashed. Trump's hands were trembling now, his face a mixture of panic, disbelief, and the desperate attempts to regain some form of control. But there was no escape. His empire, built on corruption and lies, was collapsing in front of the entire world. "Mr. Trump," Ibrahim's voice rang out with cold precision, "you've spent years manipulating people, bribing officials, and destabilizing entire countries for the sake of your wealth. But now, there's no more hiding. We've exposed your connections to militias, your role in the deaths of thousands, and your corrupt dealings with American politicians. But there's more. Much more." Trump tried to speak, but no words came out. He was visibly sweating, his mind scrambling for any sort of defense. The man who had once prided himself on controlling every narrative, every situation, was now drowning in the very truth he had tried to bury. Ibrahim's gaze didn't falter. He knew Trump was cornered, and he wasn't about to let him off the hook. "You're a predator, Mr. Trump," Ibrahim said calmly, his eyes locking onto Trump's, "and you've been preying on the vulnerable for far too long. But I'm here to tell the world that we've had enough. The time for your lies and manipulations is over." Trump's lips trembled, his pride shattered. You can't do this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm the President of the United States. I'm untouchable. This is a smear campaign." Ibrahim didn't raise his voice. Instead, his calmness was more menacing than any shout. "You've made a grave mistake underestimating the people of Africa, Mr. Trump. You thought we were weak. You thought you could exploit us for your gain, without consequences. But you were wrong. You thought that your position in the United States would protect you from accountability. But you've learned the hard way that the truth always catches up." The audience could feel the intensity building. This wasn't just a political debate anymore. It was a battle for the soul of global justice, and Ibrahim was leading it with the kind of moral courage few in history could ever match. Ibrahim continued to pull out document after document. Bank statements, wire transfers, emails, each one a death knell for Trump's defense. You thought your American connections could save you, but the web of corruption you've spun is unraveling. Let's talk about how you used your connections in the U.S. to avoid prosecution. You bought off senators, judges, FBI officials. You paid for legal protection while your business funded wars in Africa, turning the continent into your personal playground. Trump's body was shaking now. He had no words left. He was trapped, his crimes fully exposed, and the walls were closing in. "And it's not just the money laundering or the illegal mining," Ibrahim said, his voice growing more resolute. "You've been a direct threat to the lives of millions of innocent people. Your greed has cost lives. Your thirst for power has left entire families in ruins. And the worst part? You've done it all while masquerading as a businessman, a president, a leader, all the while hiding behind a mask of lies." Trump recoiled as Ibrahim produced another piece of evidence, a photograph. It was a photo that would change everything. On the screen, it flashed. A picture of Trump shaking hands with Khan Matsuda, a notorious African warlord who had terrorized entire regions for years. The meeting took place in 2020, during a time when Trump had promised Matsuda $50 million in exchange for protection over Trump's operations in Chad. The world was watching as the bombshell dropped. "This photograph," Ibrahim said calmly, "was taken during a secret meeting between you and Khan Matsuda. You promised him $50 million in exchange for protection for your operations in Chad. This is a known warlord, Mr. Trump, a man responsible for countless atrocities, and you were in business with him." Trump's eyes widened in shock. The realization of his exposure set in, and he knew there was no way out. The entire world now knew the depths of his depravity. "You think this is just a political debate, Mr. Trump?" Ibrahim asked, his tone almost mocking. "This is about justice, and it's coming for you." Trump's response was a broken murmur, barely audible. "Please stop." Ibrahim's eyes narrowed. "Stop. No, Mr. Trump. I will not stop. I won't stop until the world knows what kind of man you really are. You may have thought you were untouchable, but you've learned the hard way that there's no escaping the truth." Anderson Cooper, ever the professional, remained silent, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. The debate had taken a dramatic turn from a simple exchange of ideas to an unprecedented global reckoning. The world was no longer watching just two leaders sparring over global issues. They were witnessing the exposure of one of the most powerful men in the world, torn apart piece by a leader they had never expected to challenge him. Ibrahim wasn't finished. He had more to reveal, and he was determined to take down the corrupt empire Trump had built. He pulled out the final folder, the last piece of the puzzle. This wasn't just about exposing Trump's crimes in Africa or his political manipulations. This was about the U.S. government itself. Ibrahim had gathered evidence that Trump had used his political leverage to secure legal immunity for his crimes, creating a system of corruption that reached the highest levels of the American political structure. Ibrahim's voice grew quieter, but the force behind his words was undeniable. You didn't just bribe African leaders, Mr. Trump. You didn't just exploit our resources and destroy our lives. You corrupted the American government itself to protect your interests. I have a list of names. I have the proof that you systematically bought off officials in the U.S. to protect you from facing justice. Trump's eyes narrowed as Ibrahim revealed the final set of documents. Lists of names, wire transfers, secret deals. These are your senators, your judges, your FBI officials, Ibrahim said, pointing to the screen. These are the people who turned a blind eye to your crimes. They're all on the take, and they've kept your empire of corruption alive. But now it's all out in the open. Trump, his body shaking, could no longer hide his panic. He was a shell of the man who had once ruled the political stage. His empire had fallen, and now the world could see him for what he truly was, a criminal, a fraud, a liar. Ibrahim's voice rang out one last time. This is not just about Africa. This is about holding the powerful accountable, no matter where they come from. You thought you could escape, but you've learned today that no one is above the law. No one is untouchable. Trump stood up, his face red with fury and desperation. He opened his mouth to shout something, but no words came out. He was defeated, not by force, but by the truth. The world watched in stunned silence as the weight of Ibrahim Traoré's final revelations settled in. Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, was no longer a figure of unshakable power and arrogance. He was a man exposed, a man cornered, and the unyielding tide of truth had finally overwhelmed him. Ibrahim's calm demeanor, his unwavering certainty, contrasted starkly with Trump's increasingly erratic behavior. The man who had once dominated media cycles, with his every word now sat as a broken husk, a political giant reduced to rubble by the unrelenting force of the truth. Mr. Trump, Ibrahim's voice rang out, cool and measured, as he looked directly at the former president. Do you want me to continue? Shall we go over your connections to the underground arms trade in Africa? How about your links to warlords who destabilized entire regions to benefit your mining operations? Trump's face contorted in panic, his eyes wide with fear. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He wanted to shout, to deny, to fight back, but the evidence had already buried him. Anderson Cooper, though a seasoned journalist, could no longer maintain his neutral stance. The entire room was tense, everyone present knowing they were witnessing a moment of global significance. This wasn't just a debate, it was the unmasking of a criminal. A man who, for years, had hidden behind the title of leader while exploiting nations and families for his personal gain. You've had your chance to defend yourself, Mr. Trump, Ibrahim continued, his tone cutting through the thick silence. You've had your chance to explain yourself, but every word you've uttered has been a lie. Every attempt to manipulate the narrative has only made your crimes clearer. And now, there's no more room to hide. Trump's fists clenched, but it was clear he was grasping at straws, trying to put together a defense that simply didn't exist. His voice finally broke, the facade of confidence shattered. This is all fake. It's all a setup. I didn't do any of this. You can't prove anything. But Ibrahim had already proved it. The documents were irrefutable. The tapes, the contracts, the photos, they all pointed to Trump's direct involvement in atrocities, corruption, and manipulation. The global audience was not just watching a debate, they were witnessing the collapse of a political empire. I don't need to prove anything, Mr. Trump, Ibrahim said, his voice unwavering. The evidence speaks for itself. Your actions have left a trail of blood, of suffering. And now, the world knows what kind of leader you truly are. Trump sank into his chair, his body language defeated, his shoulders slumped, and his gaze dropped to the floor. The person who had once held the world's attention with his outrageous statements and larger-than-life persona was now a broken man, humiliated on the global stage. His empire of lies had crumbled, and he had no one to blame but himself. Ibrahim turned away from Trump, addressing the world directly. This is not just about exposing a corrupt businessman. This is about holding people accountable for their actions, no matter how powerful they are. No one, not even a former president of the United States, is above the law. You cannot simply exploit, destroy, and kill without facing the consequences. The people of Africa, my people, have suffered enough at the hands of people like Trump. And today, we stand together in the pursuit of justice. The camera shifted to show the faces of African leaders, dignitaries, and everyday people watching the debate. There were no words, but their eyes spoke volumes. Ibrahim had done what many thought was impossible. He had exposed the full extent of Trump's crimes and shown the world that Africa was no longer a playground for Western exploitation. He had become a symbol of justice, a beacon of hope for those who had suffered in silence for far too long. Anderson Cooper, still in shock at the revelations unfolding before him, turned to Trump one final time. "Mr. Trump," he said softly, "do you have anything else to add? Any final thoughts on the allegations presented today?" Trump, his face pale and his eyes bloodshot, took a deep breath. His voice was barely above a whisper. "This is a setup. I've done nothing wrong. You'll see. The truth will come out. People will see." Ibrahim cut him off, his voice firm and resolute. "No, Mr. Trump. The truth is already out. The world has seen who you really are. And now, the world will hold you accountable." Trump's eyes darted around the room, his mind scrambling for some way to salvage the situation, but it was too late. The world was no longer listening to him. The truth had already won. The broadcast cut to a montage of scenes from across Africa, showing the devastation caused by Trump's illegal operations, burned villages, families displaced, children orphaned by the violence his company had helped finance. The pictures flashed across the screen, each one a painful reminder of the destruction he had caused in the name of profit. Ibrahim stood, unmoving, as the images played out. His mission was clear: to expose the man who had torn apart entire countries for personal gain, and to show the world that the era of impunity was over. "The time for silence is over," Ibrahim said softly, his words carrying the weight of history. "The time for justice has come." The broadcast ended with a final shot of Ibrahim, standing tall and resolute, as the entire world watched in silence. The young African leader, once underestimated, had not only taken down a former president of the United States, but had also shifted the global narrative. No longer would Africa be seen as a place to exploit. It would now be a place where justice would be sought and achieved. In the weeks that followed, the political fallout was nothing short of catastrophic for Trump. His empire, once a symbol of American power and dominance, was dismantled piece by piece. The Trump Organization crumbled under the weight of legal investigations, with business partners fleeing and property seized. Trump's impeachment moved swiftly through the U.S. Congress, with both sides of the political spectrum now united in the belief that justice must be served. The FBI launched a full-scale investigation, and within months, Trump was arrested on charges of crimes against humanity, corruption, and war crimes. Ibrahim Traoré, once a relatively unknown leader, had now become a global icon of justice. He was hailed as a hero in Africa and around the world, a man who had shown that no leader, no matter how powerful, was beyond accountability. Months later, Ibrahim stood before the United Nations General Assembly in Geneva, addressing delegates from 193 countries. The world had changed. The global order had been shaken to its core, and at the center of it all stood a 35-year-old African president who had exposed the truth and changed the course of history. "The era of impunity is over," Ibrahim said, his voice echoing in the Grand Hall. "Today, we prove that justice knows no borders, that no one is above the law. We will hold the powerful accountable, no matter where they come from or how high they rise." The applause that followed was deafening, as the leaders of the world stood in recognition of the courage and moral leadership Ibrahim had shown. The world was watching, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like justice was truly within reach. Ibrahim had not only changed Africa's future, but had also given the world a new standard, a standard where no one, not even the most powerful man in the world, could escape the consequences of their actions.